I wanted to just start this morning with this gospel passage we heard from Luke 12, because it brings to mind both myself and people that I've known, and I suspect folks that you all have known. Jesus tells this story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, "What should I do? I don't have room for all my crops." Then he said, "I know, I'll tear down the barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have room enough to store all my wheat and other goods. And I'll sit back and say to myself, 'My friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy. Eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for?' Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God." The Greek there at the end actually says, but not be rich in God. A rich relationship with God, sort of says it. Others say be rich toward God, but the Greek actually is rich in God. And the picture there is somehow we are in the midst of God, surrounded by God, and it is there that we are rich rather than with possessions. Now, I've been, I was going to say privileged, but I think that's the wrong word. The simple fact is that I have in my life known several billionaires, billionaire with a B. And they have ranged in attitude and personality from one who said, not only is it important for me to win, it's also important that they lose, to another who simply believed that people should be cared for with compassion and any help that he could give, and several others in between. The amount of money you have somehow doesn't automatically determine your attitude toward others, but the attitude of this rich landowner is often reflected among billionaires, but I would say also among hundredaires. You know, when we got $100 and we're feeling pretty good, we're thinking about the ways to eat, drink, and be merry, to preserve it and save it, and on and on and on. And I'm not dismissing just everyday wisdom, where you shouldn't be profligate. But really what's being asked for here is a heart that is open toward others, that cares about others, that willingly shares with others. One of the things that I've seen in Africa among Christians is that believers there, most of them, have so little money that were they to see the amount of money that the poorest among us have in this congregation, they would think that we were really, really rich. I mean, it's orders of magnitude often. And yet those same people are rich in God. One of the things that you discover quickly among African believers, in Africa, is their willingness to share what they have even when they don't have much. In fact, they would feel terrible if they couldn't share the last bowl of rice with you rather than keep it for themselves. The honor of sharing it, the joy of sharing it is so extraordinarily great. And I believe that it's that attitude, even with a little, that Jesus is encouraging us to have. And then Paul, too, in Colossians 3, I want to read you just a couple of passages from there in the Message. And he's talking about how we relate to one another. Don't lie to one another, You're done with that old life. It's like a filthy set of ill-fitting clothes that you stripped off and put in the fire. Now you're dressed in a new wardrobe. It's, if you would, the prodigal son. You've heard me talk about this again and again and again, who comes home covered in pig poop because he's been living with the pigs. And his father wraps a brand new robe around him. I promise there was a bath later. But the first response of the father, after hugging him and holding him while he is still covered, the father hugs him and holds him, and it says falls on his neck. And then he calls for a clean robe to be put on him and a ring on his finger signifying sonship. His relationship has been restored. Sandals for his feet. This is the new garment that he puts on when he is received, when he is taken back. And so here in the message in Colossians 3, you're done with that old life. It's like a filthy set of ill-fitting clothes that you've stripped off and put in the fire. You know the prodigal did that a little bit later, probably before the party started. The clothes from the pig farm went into the fire. Now you're dressed in a new wardrobe. Every item of your new way of life is custom made by the Creator with His label on it. All the old fashions are now obsolete. Words like Jewish and non-Jewish, religious and irreligious, insider and outsider, uncivilized and uncouth, slave and free mean nothing. I think it's interesting here in this translation, he doesn't say Jew and Greek, he says Jew and non-Jew. It's like Yehudim and Goyim, those who are Jewish and those who are not, religious and irreligious. Isn't it an interesting thing that he says you're not either of these anymore? Not religious, not irreligious. Irreligious, not a-religious, no religion, but irreligious is sort of, you really don't like that religion stuff, and so you're negative about it. He says not that, but he also says not religious. And the implication here is not that we have true religion, that we have healthy relationship with God, but rather that we put on airs, that we work to look religious. And he's saying, you know, you don't need to do that anymore. You don't need to dress up to look religious, right? Robe, stole. Does anybody know what a stole represents, just as a little aside right here? The yoke of Christ. When he says put on the yoke, that's what it represents, the yoke of Christ. And the collar, I'm not wearing a collar today, but the collar that a clergy person will occasionally wear, there's some debate about what it means, but to my mind what it represents is a slave's collar. I'm a bond servant of Jesus Christ. All right, so back, religious, irreligious, Jewish, non-Jewish, all of that. From now on, everything is defined by Christ, by the Anointed One. Everyone is included in Christ. All of those that are in Him are included, gathered together. And then he says, so chosen by God for this new life of love, dress in the wardrobe God picked out for you. Compassion, kindness, humility, quiet strength, discipline. That's the clothing we wear. It's the clothing of love, if you would. Be even-tempered, content with second place. Isn't that an interesting line? Content with second place. Now I have to win, and they have to lose. Instead, content with second place. Quick to forgive an offense. Now, for all of the things that we're asked to do, isn't this one of the ones that each of us in our hearts finds ourselves least able to do? Because we've all been offended. We've all been insulted. We've all been spoken to sarcastically and condescendingly. Offense has been offered to us often. And what he's saying here now is, you don't have to take it. It might be offered to you, but you don't have to take it. Leave the offense aside. Hard as it is, that actually ultimately is an act of love. Because rather than binding you to the offender because of the offense that you feel for the offense that they offered, you're now bound in this really quite sick way. By not accepting the offense, by not being offended, that kind of sick tying together is precluded, and you are able to continue to persist in love. Forgive as quickly and completely as the Master forgave you. Now let's just reflect on how quickly did the Master forgive me? Well, if I mess up and I say, sorry, Lord, how long is the pause between that apology, that desire for forgiveness, and his giving forgiveness to me? Is it, a year?
About negative 2,000 years.
About negative 2,000 years. Even less than a nanosecond. There's no time. You're forgiven immediately. When we come to him and say, sorry, Lord, there are not folded arms and tapping foot and rolled eyes. When we ask for forgiveness, we're forgiven like that. And so here the encouragement to us as his followers who have put him on is that we forgive as quickly as we've been forgiven. Not just that we do forgive because we've been forgiven, that's in the Lord's Prayer, but even that we forgive as quickly as we've been forgiven. To just say, yes, you're forgiven. You're forgiven. And regardless of whatever else you put on, wear love. It is your basic all-purpose garment. Never be without it. It's like the little black dress, right? Okay, or the black tux, I suppose. It's always right. It's always in style. Although in this case, it's the little white dress and the white suit that Tattoo wore, along with whatever the other guy's name was. Sorry, that's a distant reference. Forget that. Wear love. It's your basic all-purpose garment. Never be without it. And then here's the final paragraph that I want to finish with this morning. It's Galatians 3:15 through 17, because there's an important key message here which is really counter to our individualistic culture. I mean, the reality is, isn't it, that we are a collection of narcissists who put up with each other? Is that fair? Yeah, it's fair. And here's what Paul says instead. Let the peace of Christ keep you in tune with each other, in step with each other. None of this going off and doing your own thing. And cultivate thankfulness. Let the word of Christ, the message, have the run of the house. Give it plenty of room in your lives. Instruct and direct one another using good common sense. And sing your hearts out to God. Let every detail in your lives, words, actions, whatever, be done in the name of the Master Jesus, thanking God the Father every step of the way. And so the secret there in wearing love is in being in relationship with him and with each other, not just with one's self. You know, Jesus says, from Leviticus, love your neighbor as yourself. So it's okay to love yourself. It's okay to take care of yourself. It's an assumed reality. But what happens is we stay there. We stop there, and we become the culture of narcissists who tolerate each other. And what's being called for here for us to do is to step out of self, to put on love, not just for self, but for God and others, and do that, if you would, in community. Not as individual seekers after God, even doing our own thing, but together, holding each other up, encouraging each other, holding each other accountable when needed, speaking truth in love when necessary, but being there for each other day after day, year in and year out, as the body of Christ gathered together in love. May that be us more than we can possibly ask or imagine.